editing a photo of a crane. This was taken at the Central Park Zoo in New York. Took a trip up there recently, and this is one of the images that I captured. I had a great time, just kind of walking around the zoo. What you'll notice is there's another crane kind of sticking out into this particular image. So this is a perfect time to test out the retouching tools inside of ON1. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and click on retouch. I haven't done anything else to this image. I usually do my retouching at the beginning of an edit, so that's what we're going to do. What I want to do is get rid of this this crane's beak. Now I'm going to try the magic eraser just to see what it will do for me. So I'm just going to paint over this area, and I am using my mouse to do this. So it's not the absolute most precise, and I'm okay if I lose this little bit of greenery here as well. So we'll click, let that go, and let's see what ON1 does with the AI or the eraser tool here. So just like that, it's done a really good job. Now I do need to come in here and clean this up, and I think that's where the healing brush really does shine. So I'll just paint over that, and it should help blur that little line and get rid of it. You wouldn't even notice that. Now we're going to zoom in here by hitting Command plus, or you can hold down the Command key and scroll in with your wheel on the mouse if you're using 2023.5 version of ON1. But there's this little piece right here that I really want to get rid of because I think that makes sense. I want to see if I can even kind of repaint some of those feathers, but that might be pushing it just a little too much. So what I'm going to do is make my brush size a little bit smaller, and I'm going to grab the clone stamp tool. I'm just going to sample an area out here by holding down the Option key or the Alt key if you're on a PC. And I'm just going to click an area that I want to sample. So this seems to be a pretty decent area. And I get this overlay where I get to see what it is going to look like. And I'm just going to paint over this area like so. And that looks pretty good. When I zoom out, you probably won't even be able to tell. Now, like I said, I want to make an attempt of repainting some of these feathers. And I think to do that, I'm going to see if I could zoom in just a little bit more here. So we're really up close and personal with this crane. And now what I'm going to do is hold down the Option key, and I am going to click maybe somewhere around, maybe here. Let's see. And all we're going to do is try and duplicate what is already on the image. Now, the hair, it starts to, he gets a haircut right around here. So now what I need to do is find an area that I can sample that has the hair that I want to kind of extend into this area. And we'll see if I can make this happen. Maybe like so. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. And I'll figure out what to do with the background here in a second. Right now, and you know what? Let's try pulling up on our feather at the end. We'll try 100% and see if that solves some of the issue that we're running into here. So I'm going to sample this area, and we'll come right about here, and we'll just paint this down. Now, I think I'm going to have to paint that little back part away, but we're starting to get some of that detail back into the photo. Let's see here. So now what we'll do is we will grab our magic eraser, and let's just try to magically erase it. Or is this even called the magic eraser? Perfect eraser. Got to call it by the right term. It kind of works like magic, so maybe it fits. So all I'm going to do is kind of give him a haircut by coming down in this direction. So that way it blends with what was naturally in the image. I don't know how this is going to come out, but we'll do something like that. And let's see what ON1 comes up with. And it looks pretty decent. What I would like to be able to do is kind of like blend that away and mask it away. I will try testing that out with some layers, but let's zoom out and see how this looks. So it does look pretty obvious that we did some work over here. So all I'm going to do is zoom back in, And by the way, this is destructive to the photo. So make sure that you are aware of when you are operating destructively. And the magic eraser, or perfect eraser I should say, it is a destructive edit, but I'm okay with what it is doing here today. So what I'm going to do is clone stamp some more of this area over here. I'm just going to paint that over this area and kind of give him a haircut, and we'll see how that works. So that kind of blends in a little bit better. So if we hit Command and 0 to zoom back out, I think I can live with that as my overall image. Obviously, I got rid of the beak that was poking into his head, and now this looks pretty good. So what I can do is I'll click off of that, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop a preset over this image. We'll find one that looks kind of cool. This one looks pretty extreme here. I think I'll go with this one. And we're going to modify this. So once you click on it, I'm just going to come right over here to effects, and we're going to turn off these effects and see what's actually happening. So it looks like this dynamic contrast is the thing that's really like punching through on this image. And that is a really, really strong contrast. So let's take a look at how we can make this work a little bit better in our overall image. So if I pull down on the opacity, because this is already a pretty sharp image, and I don't think we need to do too much more with making it sharp. Now, let's see, is there a blend mode with this? Nope, it's on normal. So I think we're okay there. But what you can see is it was pulled up out of the skin tone. If we pull that down, it's very subtle. I can see it on the monitor here. I don't know if it'll come through on YouTube. What's really driving this is this small contrast. So if I back that down just a touch here, I think we're going to get something that looks a little bit more what we would assume is okay. So now we're going to turn on the black and white filter. I'm not quite sure what this is doing. It doesn't look like it's doing anything. There's probably a blend mode. Yeah, it's on luminosity. Okay. So it's probably trying to counteract some of the noise, but I'm not worried about that. So I'm just going to turn that off because I don't think it's doing anything. All right, so what I will do is let's add a glow and see what happens when we make this image glow after having all of that contrast down there. I'm really not liking what's happening to the background here. So I'm actually just going to come back to the dynamic contrast, and I am going to mask this away from the background. So I'm just going to select this, and it does pick up on the fact that there's an animal. We'll go ahead and apply that, and we want to paint this in so that way everything else gets the effect painted away from it. So we'll see the outline of him turn white, or her, I don't know, the bird, and everything else kind of turns red, which is perfect for what we want. And even that seems to only do so much. So now what I think is happening is I have in the background here just a good amount of noise. To deal with that, we'll come over to the develop module, or actually, you know what? We'll try something else. I haven't done this before. And I love experimenting. So if you guys are willing to go along for the ride, let's experiment. ON1 has left this noise reduction filter inside of the effects module. And this could be one of those opportunities where ON1 leaving some of the legacy tools behind as they create these new tools work to our favor. So I'm going to pump up on the luminance here and see if that gets rid of that background noise, and it's doing a pretty decent job. We can probably even pull down on the detail, and I'm probably even going to throw a slight blur over this to kind of help that out. But obviously I don't like what it's doing to the bird here. So what I'm going to do is mask that away, and I'm just going to use the AI mask just like we did earlier, because actually foreground seems to be working pretty good with this one, and I want to paint this one away this time. So foreground, paint out, hit apply, And now our bird is preserved from this luminosity this noise reduction. And we'll put that all the way at the bottom because I wanted to reduce the noise, or maybe we'll put it, well, I guess it doesn't really matter because there's a mask on there. For the sake of not getting confused, I'm going to delete that black and white filter. And I think the next thing that I want to do is kind of make this image make the background more blurred. So I'm going to click on the dynamic contrast because I want this effect that I'm applying to go in between the glow and the dynamic contrast. I'm going to hit add. We're going to click on, I think I'm going to go with a regular blur. I could use a lens blur here, and the difference between the two really does matter. Now, what I'm going to do is select the foreground, and I'm also going to paint this out of that area, and I'm going to hit apply. Now, we're going to see the swan or the crane, come back into focus. There's these hard edges. Now, this is kind of an advanced masking technique, but in ON1, you can actually combine masks. So what I'm going to do is use a linear gradient mask. I'm going to hit the letter M on my keyboard, and I'm going to click on linear bottom and just click right here. And as you can see, what it does is it paints the mask away from all of the areas that you want in a gradient type shape or a format. So all I'm going to do is make a really, really big gradient here, and we're just going to pull this all the way, and I'm going to zoom out so that way I can see the entire gradient over the photo, and just pull this all the way out. And what I really want to do is make this gradient 100% impacted at the top, and really bringing this center line, which is our 50% marker, I want to bring that to the bottom of the image. So I'm just going to pull this out even more, and we're going to keep it somewhere right in there. Now, that does make a huge difference, I think, at least. So hitting Command 0 and zooming back in, you can see that this background, it has a Gaussian blur on it right now, but we're going to change this over to surface blur, and that really just gets rid of that noise that's happening in the background over there. And I can change the threshold, which is just saying at what point or how much information do you want to consider before you start to blur. So if I pull this threshold up, it will include more, or it makes the tolerance a little bit higher, which is fine because I like the blur that I already had on the background from the lens. I just want to get rid of some of that noise, and that's all that I'm doing with the surface blur here. And I can increase the amount just a touch, and I think I need to come back to this particular mask, the linear mask. It was starting to create this edge right at the top, and I don't want that. So now we are pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter Z so that way I get off of that gradient mask. So here is the before image, and here is what we've gotten to so far. Now, with some of the edits, I have already made the bird, the eye of the bird, a little bit dark. So we're going to come over to local, and I'm going to increase the exposure around the eye there. And the way that I'm going to do that is just increase the exposure, make my brush size a little bit larger, paint over the area. And I'm going to loosely paint this because I don't really have a huge concern of how this is applying originally, because I'm going to refine this, right? So if I hit the letter O, you can see that I got a pretty good amount of the area selected, and I actually have the perfect brush on. So I'm going to hit Command R to turn that off because I do want to impact this entire area. So we'll just paint over all of this, and I think that is good. So we'll hit the letter O, and we're back to looking at our mask, or I'm sorry, at our image completely. I'm going to pull down on the blacks because I think that there should be some contrast to this as I pull up on the shadows here. And then what I really need to do to make that eye pop is create another adjustment. And there's so many ways that you could do this. I'm just doing this the way that I'm doing it right now, but I'm going to pull up on the exposure, and the structure. And what I really want to do is make this eye shine. So I'm just going to hover my mouse, or in fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here because it makes it a little bit easier for you to see what you're doing. And I'm going to make my brush size smaller and just click one time right over the eye. And you're going to see that that really makes that eye stand out a little bit more compared to the rest of this area of his face, or whatever it's called. I don't know bird anatomy like that. But the area where his eye is, right? It's going to make that area stand out a little bit more. And what I think I'll do is let's mess around with the haze slider here a little bit and see if that helps. Sometimes by dehazing the eyes, it helps make that separation. And maybe I need some contrast in here and maybe just a little bit more exposure. Really trial and error. And it's okay if it gets overbaked while you're putting on the adjustment, because we can always zoom out and really just work this opacity slider. But before I start to mess with the opacity slider, because you can see his eye is starting to like have this weird glow, and I'm not a fan of that. I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the highlight just a slight bit, and even pull up on the skin tone, so that starts to blend it a little bit more. And this is the beauty of using the blend modes inside of ON1, or I'm sorry, the blending options inside of ON1. And now I'm just going to pull down on the opacity, and I think that starts to bring a little bit more of a realistic adjustment for the eye. It's brighter, and I think that that's pretty good. So the final thing that I'll do is add in my vignette. So I'm going to hit the letter M on the keyboard to get my masking bug. I'm going to grab the strong vignette, click right here in the center, and I'm going to shape this so that the eye of the bird is kind of in the top part of this this oval. And I'll probably play around with the size here a little bit, but I just want to blend this out and take a look. I really do like where this is going. I'm okay with the vignette being a little off-centered, but what I think it needs to do is come down just a little bit further, because there's not that much information up here in the top left. I don't think the photo needs to be cropped. I just think that more attention needs to be taken away from this area and this area, and really just like direct you down into where the bird's eye is. And I think that the vignette tool that or the vignette effect that I just used, I think that that works really well. I like the way that the greens are popping down here at the bottom. If I really wanted to, I guess I could come over here to the effects, and this is just where I start experimenting. So, you know, this is not something that you absolutely must do, but you can come to the color enhancer, and I will just grab the adjust saturation, grab the color picker here, or the picker tool, click, and then just drag that to the right and saturate the reds in the image overall just a little bit, because the goal here is all about subtlety. And you see that when I pulled the saturation of the reds over to the right, it really started to change the way that this eye looks. And if I turn it off and on, you can see that the red is really starting to compete with the brightness of the eye. So what I need to do is pull down on the brightness, so that way that eye comes right back into play. And since that eye is more orange, I'm going to pull up on the brightness of the orange, and, you know, maybe we'll pull the oranges over a little bit more in hue to make a separation between the red and the orange color in the overall image. And maybe I don't want the entire eye to be affected, or at least that color range. So I'll be very precise by pulling down on the range of the oranges, and that just helps me really hone in a little bit more to that eye. Come back to the red, maybe we'll pull down on the reds, and maybe we'll even pull down on the hue of the reds, so that way there's some color separation and contrast between the eye and the red that's up there. So last thing that I'll do, I know I keep saying the last thing, but this is the last thing. Holding down the J key, I can see I really need to get rid of those overexposed highlights. So I'm going to hit the develop module, and I'm just going to hold down the J key and pull down on my highlights until I see that go away, which that pretty much did it. And you can also look at your histogram, which is probably the most accurate way of doing what I just did. But I did it the way that I did it because, I'm me. And hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So I will leave it at that. This is the before image, which I think I captured it quite well. Obviously, I got rid of the distractions at the beginning, and that was the main thing that drew me into this particular photo, because I didn't have another frame where it was just this singular crane in the image. So I went ahead and got rid of that beak that was floating in there. And then I went ahead and modified it to turn it into something that I could potentially post to my social and share with friends and family. If you found this tutorial helpful, please smash that like button. If you want to see more content around ON1 and you haven't subscribed already, well, then today I think you should hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to check that bell icon so you get notified when I release new content. Now, if you haven't picked up ON1 Photo Raw 2023 and you want to save some money, go ahead and check that link in the description box below and use the Free Will Photos 20 coupon code, and it'll save you 20% when you're picking up a download of this particular program. I really appreciate everyone's support. I look forward to your comments down below and just hearing how you guys are using ON1 in your photography. So until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.